Anyway, we got a great guest list tonight. Joining me now, first up, Kevin O'Leary, our great pal Kevin O'Leary, chairman of O'Leary Ventures, Shark Tank investor, author of Cold Hard Truth on Business, Money, and Life. Kevin, I'd like to talk to you about 30 seconds about this bank merger or bank bailout. And then the rest of it, I want to talk to you about what happened to Mary Daly. And then the rest of that, Kevin, because I know you, what's going on in America? All these pessimistic polls. I can't stand it. Honestly, I just can't stand it. Anyway, is this bank deal any good in your judgment?
I want everybody to understand this bank deal left $20 billion in the hands of taxpayers. And you know, FDIC insurance is actually paid by banks into a big fund, about $250 billion. This took $20 billion. It cost the fund $20 billion. Those are, let's call them worthless assets. Now, who paid for that fund? You did. You did, because those are bank fees.
Yeah.
Those are bank fees put through the system. Those are taxpayers paying for the banking system. And so this is a smart move by the buying bank, a smaller bank getting bigger. That's great. And it got a 16% discount. But no one's looking at the $20 billion. I'm looking at the $20 billion. I paid for the $20 billion. I don't want to do that again and again and again and again, because there's not enough money in the FDIC insurance to bail out every bank run by an idiot. So it still brings to the fore the question is, how are we going to cull the herd on all these tiny regional banks that do not have an economic reason to even exist? And this is a very hard conversation, Larry. Well,
listen, I know you paid most of that $20 billion. I just want to say I paid a little sliver of that $20 billion as a taxpayer. I'm a tiny little weenie taxpayer compared to you, but you know, for me, it's a lot. And the other thing I want to ask you is, before we move on, is the banking crisis over? Is the regional banking crisis over? Is any banking crisis over?
No, I think the narrative goes on, and it will continue to go on, about how we actually recreate the banking system in America to deal with the digitization of banking, because the reasons for regional banks, and this narrative has really come up in the last 2 weeks, is we founded these banks over, in some cases, 100 years ago to take care of the diversity of the economy in different states. And then all of a sudden you overlay different policy, because I don't think you even have to talk about politics. When you talk about California, you talk about dysfunctional policy, making it very hard for businesses to actually operate there, including the banking sector. The Daily article was really hard to read and very damning on the San Francisco Fed, because it basically said they got lost. Their policy had nothing to do with managing risk and duration anymore. They were off on some really crazy agenda items that have nothing to do with banking. And I think a hard hammer is going to fall down on that. But I'd argue this, Larry, that's a poorly managed state. And as a result, you have poorly managed banks. And at the end of the day, other people in other states don't want to pay for those mistakes. I think the policy in California is bad for business, bad for banking, bad for every sector. And it's not about politics. It's bad policy.
Well, I agree. I think that's one reason why people are so pessimistic. They see what you just described. I mean, basically, it sounds to me like Mary Daly, but also I want to add the California Banking Department, or whatever it's called out there. The Wall Street Journal editorial page gave her quite a spanking. And they throw in, you know, the new vice chairman for regulation in Washington, this chap name is Barr. He also is apparently an advocate of the same climate and, you know, politically correct policies that got Mary Daly and the Californians in trouble in the first place. So I don't know where I'm going to get relief. And maybe that's why people are so pessimistic. It goes from one bad actor to another.
The Fed has a very narrow mandate when it comes to supervising bank functions. I mean, if you'd have been focused on the quality of the loan book and the duration of the deposits that were being deployed into 10-year-plus bonds, you would have figured out right away that this bank was offside, but somehow that missed them completely. How can you miss that when that's 80% of your mandate? Daly is having a very, very bad hair day today. There's just no way this is going to look good on the resume.
Yeah, I agree. Kevin, just the last one. It strays a little bit from the business line, but not entirely. People are very pessimistic about the future, about their kids' future. It looks like traditional values are slumping. You know, we talked about this in the opening. You've got a bunch of people, Americans are pulling back from patriotism. They don't like religion. They don't want to have kids, et cetera, et cetera. I don't want you to have to wade into social policies, but there's, you know, in some sense, the root of the pessimism, I think, is kind of anchored in the lack of confidence in the economy. And that includes banks, that includes inflation, that includes mortgage rates, that includes every darn thing. To me, we're not going to straighten this story out until we find some group of people. I don't know who it's going to be. I worked for Reagan, I worked for Trump. Maybe it's going to be Republican, maybe it's not. I don't know that it's Biden. But somebody's got to put some confidence back into the economic future. That's what's going to cure this pessimism, isn't it?
Yes, I agree with you. And you just threw me a softball because I'm just going to rage against the machine again. These polls are taken in highly dense population areas. That would be New Jersey, New York, Massachusetts, California. Not everybody in America is governed by poor policy, as those states are. And I know people want to turn that into a political statement. Go to places like Kentucky or Montana or Dakota, North and South, or Tennessee. There's a lot more optimism there. And you can even go to Arizona. You don't just have to go to red states. There's places where people are optimistic about the future, but not when you have an AOC or Elizabeth Warren. I know I'm taking a shot at them. I respect them as politicians. I hate their policy. Right. It's destroying their economies. Why are they not challenged at the polling booth? Come on, people. Look at what's happening to your states. You're getting destroyed. No wonder you're pessimistic. I wouldn't invest a dime in those places.
By the way, I've written books that JFK, the Democrat, had good economic policies. Bill Clinton, the Democrat, had at least some good economic policies. I like this thought. By the way, I'm going to pursue this. What we need is polling that takes out New York, California, Illinois, Massachusetts. Let's get them out of the polls, and maybe we'll see a much different America. I love that point. Kevin O'Leary, I knew he had a role for you in the show today. That's absolutely splendid point. Last word, let's change the polling. Go ahead, take a whack at it.
Listen, I'll go right back to this. Every one of these politicians has to make payroll. You've got to hire people that run a business in America, because America is about business. It's about small companies growing into big ones. That's 65% of our economy. Don't vote for a politician that's never made payroll on a Wednesday night. That's my new rule.
That's fantastic. Kevin O'Leary, the best of the best. Thanks, ever.